Hello, ambassadors. Welcome to our third lesson in the series of 4 parables that I call Short Stories, Tall Orders. The things these 4 parables have in common is they all place demands upon us as Jesus' disciples. First, we looked at the parable of the unforgiving servant in Matthew 18:21-25, as we saw how God expects us to forgive early and often, and how he will treat us if we don't. Last week we looked at the parable of the wedding feast in Matthew 22:1-14. That parable contained 2 demands, so I called it RSVP required, black tie not optional. God expects us to respond to his grace, and he expects us to show proper respect for the gift of his grace. We cannot just come to Christ and continue to live as though we had not. Today we look at the parable of the 10 virgins in Matthew 25:13 in a lesson I call Be Prepared, because it shows that God expects us to be ready whenever Jesus comes, whether by our deaths or by his second coming. I hope you've had a chance to take a look at the questions, but let's look at the text first. Matthew 25:1-13. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Here is the bridegroom, come out and meet him." So all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "Since there will not be enough for us and you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves." And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in and with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour." Wedding customs in Jesus' day were obviously very different from our day. What do you know about the way they did weddings that shed some light on this subject? You know, a wedding celebration in any time or culture typically brims with emotion, including the culmination of joy and the realization of an anticipated promise, thereby aptly expressing a believer's union with Christ at the end of time, so that Revelation 19 verses 7 and 8 can say, "Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. Fine linen, bright and clean, were given to her to wear." Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs as it's sometimes called, chapter 2 verse 17 through chapter 3 lays out the structure of a Jewish wedding. It really begins with chapter 2 verse 16, but actually the wedding itself is seen in chapter 3. It begins though with this, "My beloved is mine and I am his." Jesus' parable of the wise and foolish virgins in Matthew 25 describes the arrival of the groom during the night prior to a wedding. When we put all the evidence together that we piece from here and there in the scriptures and from archaeological discoveries and other writings that are contemporary with the New Testament, it appears that what would happen is the groom and his companions would traditionally arrive at the ceremonial wedding house first during the night, and they would be received by a group of young women, which is the setting of Matthew 25:1-13. The groom would be attired in a festive headdress. We see references to it in Song of Songs 3:11 and Isaiah 61:10. And he'd be attended by male companions, one of whom would serve as his best man, which explains why John the Baptist described himself as the groom's friend or the best man in John 3:29. When he arrived, the groom's family would host a feast. Early the next day, the friends of the groom would go out to bring back the bride, and she would arrive in a sedan chair with the groom's friends as her symbolic honor guard. There are passages from Hebrew writings like the Babylonian Talmud that tell us that at a Jewish wedding in the early Christian era, a groom would wear a ceremonial crown and receive his bride, who would make her entrance to the wedding party in a sedan chair. And this might explain the description in Song of Songs 3, verses 6 through 11. The bride's entourage also included a musical procession, and the bride was adorned in embroidered garments and jewelry, and she had a veil. And the marriage would be consummated on the first night of the banquet celebration. Typically, the celebration would last for 7 days, and the bridal couple would seal their union in a bridal chamber, and the blood-stained nuptial sheet would be saved by the bride's parents as proof of her virginity. We see reference to that in Deuteronomy 22:17. Now, as the public solemnization of an agreement that was made at the time of the engagement, a wedding was an occasion for great joy. The ceremony itself most likely consisted of reciting a simple formula, like one that is alluded to in Genesis 2:23, when God presents Eve to Adam. Marriage contracts from ancient Jewish writings seem to be very, very simple. The groom would say something to the effect that the woman was his wife and he was her husband for eternity. The wedding ceremony may also have involved the symbolic act of the man covering his bride with the corner of his garment to indicate that she was now under his protection and it was his responsibility to provide for her. We see allusions to that in places like Ruth chapter 3, verse 9. And then everybody would toast the bride and groom and pronounce blessings upon them. Question 2. Do you get the feeling that this would have been a somewhat common story in their day? Well, as a matter of fact, the story of how those foolish virgins missed it all is perfectly true to life. Dr. J. Alexander Findlay wrote a book, Jesus as They Saw Him, and he describes something that he himself experienced years ago in Israel. He says this: "When we were approaching the gates of a Galilean town, I caught sight of 10 maidens gaily clad and playing some kind of musical instrument as they danced along the road in front of our car. When I asked what they were doing, the driver told me that they were going to keep the bride company till her bridegroom arrived. I asked him if there was any chance of attending the wedding, but he shook his head, saying, 'It might be tonight or tomorrow night, or in a fortnight's time. Nobody ever knows for certain.' Then he went on to explain that one of the great things to do, if you could, at a middle-class wedding in Palestine was to catch the bridal party napping. So the bridegroom comes unexpectedly and sometimes in the middle of the night. Now it's true that he's required by public opinion to send a man along the street to shout, 'Behold, the bridegroom is coming.' But that may happen at any time, so the bridal party have to be ready to go out into the street at any time to meet him whenever he chooses to come." Other important points from this story are that no one is allowed on the streets after dark without a lighted lamp, and that when the bridegroom has once arrived and the door has been shut, latecomers to the ceremony are not admitted. So what you've got here is a fairly modern depiction of exactly the same story that Jesus told in this parable. Question 3, verses 8 and 9. Do you think this was mean on the part of the wise virgins? Were the foolish virgins trying to game the system? Well, look at the text. "And the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'Since there will not be enough for you and for us, go rather to the dealer and buy for yourselves.'" See, in this case, the bridegroom seems to have been considerably delayed. That person announcing his coming might come right in front of the bridegroom, or he might come several hours ahead of the bridegroom. And the young women who did not bring extra oil realized when they trimmed the wicks of their lamps that they'd already used up all their oil. So they asked those who have extra oil to share it with them. But the other bridesmaids don't have enough to go around for everyone. This was really not selfishness. It was just the fact that they realized that if they shared their little oil, then all the torches would burn low and there wouldn't be enough light for the wedding procession. Because they may need to wait a while before the bridegroom emerges from down the road, they need a good supply of oil. So the point is that by the time the unprepared girls return with their extra oil, the procession has already arrived at the groom's house and gone inside. Question 4. What responsibility do we have to provide for those who are in need due to their own irresponsibility or short-sightedness? Read Galatians 6:5, 2 Thessalonians 3:10, Galatians 6:2. What light do these three verses shed on this question? Well, here are those texts. Galatians 6:5, for each will have to bear his own load. 2 Thessalonians 3:10, for even when we were with you, we would give you this command, if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. I hope you sense the tension in these verses. Jesus called us to live a narrow way, the careful midpoint between two extremes. We should be willing to help, but we should not be willing to enable irresponsibility. Question 5. What happened to the unprepared virgins? What's the lesson for us? Well, the simple answer is they were shut out from the feast and not allowed to enter. Dr. Thomas Constable said this, the closed door, which to those who were ready meant security and untold bliss, to the others meant banishment and untold gloom. The point of the story is, be prepared. In the story of the 10 virgins, we're taught that every person is responsible for his or her own spiritual condition. When Jesus returns, it will be too late to repent. So we must not wait to choose how to respond to him. And it also tells us that the preparation of one person can't be transferred like oil to another. Each disciple needs to prepare for the Messiah's return and to anticipate that event. Now, Jesus was not calling for alertness in this parable. Somebody points to the fact that all of the bridesmaids went to sleep and they slept while they were waiting for the groom. And Jesus may address that other places, but that's not what the point is here. He's calling for preparation. Be ready whenever Jesus comes. Question 6. What are some arenas in life that we could make application of this parable? What are some ways in which we should be prepared? Well, I think we could certainly say that in every area of life, we need to be prepared. Preparation helps us at work, it helps us at home. You can think of probably many ways that preparation assists, but the most important way is preparation for eternity. J.C. Ryle said this, surely none are so crazy as those who are content to live unprepared to die. Surely the unbelief of men is the most amazing thing in the world. What is the opposite of the character quality of preparedness? Well, obviously the opposite of being prepared is being unprepared. And as Lou Holtz said, only the unprepared are overcome by pressure. What are the benefits of being prepared? Do you remember that commercial a few years ago where the mechanic would take his rag and as he rubbed his hands, he would say to the camera, you can either pay me now or pay me later. And that's really what it comes down to. There are a lot of people who want to play now, but they don't realize they're going to pay the cost later. As John Maxwell said, pay now, play later, or play now and pay later. Have you ever heard the slogan, success is when preparation meets opportunity? When has preparation met opportunity in your life? Well, I heard it from Zig Ziglar. Success occurs when opportunity meets preparation. I've seen it attributed to Oprah Winfrey, but both Zig and Oprah actually stole it from the ancient Roman philosopher Seneca, who said luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So what tempts us not to be prepared? Well, I think the simple answer is delay. In many areas of life, there's a gap between when you have to pay the price and when you get the benefit. And because of that gap, we put off preparation, thinking we'll have opportunity to prepare tomorrow. The sad reality, as Benjamin Franklin said, is you may delay, but time will not. I'm sure you had a lot of thoughts about areas where preparation can help you, and hopefully these thoughts have helped a little bit, but Jesus expects us to be prepared. Next week, we're going to look at our last lesson in this series of 4 on short stories, tall orders, in a lesson I call Surprise, Surprise, Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. In the meantime, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.